Hello everyone and welcome to the snowiest game development podcast in the world. I'm joined by my co-host Rune.
Yup.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm all good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm in a great mood because today we are finally live. This podcast is real and now we have released our first episode as of recording in the 22nd of December. It's gonna be exciting to see how many views we get in future episodes and how successful we will be, because even though we have not very many views right now, I'm still excited about the small amount of feedback that we have gotten.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really fun that we've been able to bring it all the way to fruition, so to speak.
Should we open the doors for this podcast before we continue?
Yes, sounds like a great idea. Cue intro. Okay, so I think I'm gonna start this episode by listing some statistics for our first episode that has been released.
Yep.
So as of right now, I released it actually last night. So the plan originally was to release it maybe sometime before lunch on every Wednesday. The reason that it was released late at night was that originally I had written a description. I would listen through the whole episode and written down all of the links for things we talked about in the episode, links for Game Hub Umeå and so on, and written a description and stuff. And then I just closed my laptop thinking that the tab would stay open. Yeah, in the configuration page for the podcast. But then when I opened it again, it was all gone. I had to listen to the episode again and just write stuff down, and it never is as good when you do it the second time as the first one.
Well, note to ourselves before we throw out all these links, check the link in the description, yada yada. We should always write those down while we're doing the podcast.
Yeah. Exactly. And I've now realized that also during editing, I think I'm gonna just write stuff down with timestamps and stuff as I'm editing, because that will be a lot faster than just going back and having to listen to the entire episode again. So there's lots of, and also I'm this time I'm writing my descriptions in a Word document that I save, so then it doesn't matter if I close the laptop or not, so then I won't have that same problem with everything going away.
I have not seen the feedback or anything like that. Just to let you know, I just recovered from a little bit of corona, so I've been sort of out this whole week, or for a couple of days. But so I'm quite excited to hear what you have to say, and yeah, so I'm sort of hearing all of this for the first time. And before we continue, I'm just gonna say this is this episode is not gonna come out in 2022, but the first episode came out a couple of days before Christmas. That's pretty sweet. It's a little Christmas gift for our little community here, and also to listeners listening now. We picked Wednesday because we asked the community what day they wanted to, what they thought was the best day, and so on. So if you want to join the community, you can have that you can get your voice heard through the community. So we sort of take feedback from the community, and it's supposed to be like a community-run thing. So if you have ideas or topics you want to bring up and so on, you can join the Discord, and we will look into it.
Yes, exactly. So let me get to the statistics then for our first episode. So right now it's been about not even 24 hours, I would say. Right now, as I'm looking at this, we have 10 people who have listened to the episode. But I think it might be higher because as I listened to it myself, the statistics doesn't seem to be exactly live, but they aggregate after some time. And then we have actually some statistics on audience retention. So how long do people listen? So 100% of the people listen to 10 minutes and 23 seconds. And then there is only 75% that kept listening for the rest of the episode. So I'm gonna go back, I think, to see what happened during that time. It's fun to see when people quit, I guess, to see if there's anything you can improve or anything like that.
Check if I start derailing after 10 minutes. I tend to do that.
But at the same time, I think this goes into a little bit what we talked about in a previous episode about holding true to your vision versus listening to what other people say. So I think the best way forward, even though you can like steer yourself blind at the statistics and things, I think the same thing goes as with game development, that probably the best idea is to do what you think is the best and then just not focus too much on what the immediate feedback is, and rather like the long-term effect maybe of what the things you do. Actually, Joe Rogan, not to compare myself to him and his very successful podcast, but he always says that his method is post and ghost. So he just posts the episode and then he never looks at comments or anything like that. So I guess there's some value in just not caring that much about immediate feedback, but still it's fun to look at it as I guess both you and me are doing this for the first time, to see that people actually are listening and stuff.
And also I guess it's a bit different since we are, supposed to do this with the community. So, I don't know if we can post and ghost, or maybe we have to do that.
Of course.
Maybe later on we just say, nah, we're just gonna post and ghost. I feel like I'm curious to why he does that, because I do that when I release my games. I have yet to read anything about Knife Boy, and it's been out for a month now. I am terrified of reading or finding out anything. But I think I told you last episode that I got a Game of the Year award from this small indie journalist guy, and yesterday he posted it, and it was a let me check real quick. It was the Game of the Year of biggest improvement over a previous title. So that's a nice award. And then I did read, I also read his sort of reasoning on what he thought about the game. But obviously, since he gave me a award, he liked the game. It was not perfect, but he liked it, so I felt comfortable reading it without, crying myself to sleep. But yeah, I post and ghost my games because I think it's terrifying to see what people have to say. And then I sort of also do this thing where I make games that I want to play, and I make games just from pure passion. So yeah, I don't always see the point in sort of looking into too much feedback and try to change the things I'm creating, because I don't know, then it maybe defeats the purpose of making them, sort of. And then maybe it start feeling like a job. Now I just really enjoy it. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the reason that Joe Rogan posts and ghosts, as I understand it, is that in the beginning he did read comments and stuff, but then I guess when you go very big and become a very popular podcast like he did, you also get some negative reviews, and I think the reason for him was that he didn't want to engage with negativity at all, so he just wanted to focus on things that he wanted to do instead of reading stuff from people who hate them, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's you and I had this discussion before, like off air, and I said this on the show many times too, that I just hate being online, and I do think that has something to do with it. Like there's a lot of negativity and a lot of bad news, and man, like sometimes I get into this sort of rabbit hole with AI and stuff, and that freaks me out where we're heading. So I am feeling much happier and just better when I'm offline. So I wanted to do this podcast live, face to face, because that's I enjoy that kind of stuff. Now I'm obviously in Japan and you're in Stockholm, so we can't do it. But for listeners, now I set an alarm every Thursday, and that means like I can live my offline life, which is what I really enjoy. And then I have the alarm, and then we go online and we do this. But I can see when he says that he sees all that negativity and all that stuff. I can totally sort of relate to that, even though I don't necessarily have negativity thrown at me, but just by being online, there's a lot of shit, man. And I think some people can handle it better than others. I obviously can't, so I prefer to just live my life offline. But yeah, that's a good point he's making there, to, you know, not get sucked up in all of that and then just do your thing. And I think if he reads too many comments and stuff like that, he might change the way he makes the podcast, and maybe that will also kill the spirit of the podcast and the what makes it so special.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me at least, I think I'm going to keep an eye on comments and views and stuff, and just out of curiosity. So I'm curious to see how that's gonna affect me, I guess. So I guess we could do an A/B test of our reactions. So if you are not going to follow like the statistics and stuff and comments and stuff, and I can do the reverse, so we could compare our feelings about it.
But are you gonna go through the statistics now? Because at this point, I guess most of the listeners are from the community, and I feel like they're gonna be kind. So.
Exactly. I think that was actually almost all of the statistics I have. I also had a poll that I could post for the episode, and a Q&A, so you could just post a question for the listeners to answer. So I think I could just read those. Those were a bit interesting. During that episode, we talked a little bit about crunch, meaning overwork in the video games industry and having to work extra and just doing as much as possible to get something done in time, for example. So I had a poll that said, what do you think about crunch in the video games industry? And the options you have to answer was either I love it, or it's fine if it's just now and then and not all the time. And then you could answer it's a necessary evil. And then finally you could say I hate it. And we have a grand total of 3 votes as of current. So 67% said, meaning 2 people, it's fine if it's just now and then and not all of the time. And then 1 person said that it's a necessary evil. So from that very scientific sample size, I think there's at least no polar opposites, that people think that it's sort of necessary.
Yeah, I remember when we did that episode, and I had more questions to Stefan about crunch and all that, and I felt afterwards, I should have asked this, I should have asked that. But now that you gave us these extremely scientific results, they sort of align themselves with what I think, because I feel like there's so much, I don't know, like exaggerated drama about crunch. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. But I do also feel, I think, that most people are, well, like this poll, it's fine once in a while. Or it's a necessary evil, which to me means like, yeah, that's something you gotta do. You gotta do what you gotta do. But I don't know, from a lot of podcasts or just online, I feel like it's a bit exaggerated maybe. And I also wonder, so this is gonna be a very, what would you say? Not really offensive to say this, but I wonder how many people have worked with, in quotes, real jobs. Like, I develop games now full time, but I've had, in quotes, real jobs. You know, I was a plumber, I've been a builder, I've been working on a farm, I've done like those types of jobs. And I think that sitting in front of a computer and making games is not a job. I just don't... It's not the same. So I think that what I'm doing now, it's just so chill. It's so easy comparing to when I was like under that hospital cutting this pipe and was covered in shit. Like, I think this is such an easy job. And I also noticed this when I lived in Tokyo. So I know, Otto, you are an office worker, so maybe you have a opposite view on all of this. But when I worked in Tokyo with modeling, when some of my workmates, like the things they complain about was just like, all I was thinking, like, Jesus Christ, have you ever had a real fucking job? How can you think this is tough? So they would be like, oh, I can't believe we've been standing here for like 2 hours and nothing to do. And I'm like, what? This is not even a job. We're just standing in front of a camera, like acting stupid stuff. Or when you're an extra, you're just in the background, walking around, talking, like about whatever you want. Because the director might say, well, you guys in the back, can you just like walk around and pretend to have a good time? So then I would stand there in the background with some other model and pretend to have a good time. So I don't think that's like a real job comparing to, plumbing or like, what's the word, like blue collar jobs or whatever. And now I'm doing games and I still don't think this is anywhere near, like, in quotes, a real job. But so I'm also thinking that maybe when you hear like a lot of the complaints from people, I really wonder what their previous experience is like. So sure, I know that my previous experiences is what makes me think this isn't a real job. But I can also imagine that if this is your first job, that your perspective or your, everything is relative, right? So maybe you're looking at the crunch and all that stuff as something horrible. While when I worked as a plumber, I would do overtime. When certain things had to be done, we would do overtime. But you're doing that physically, with like climbing up and down ladders, pipes here and there, and cutting. And I don't know, you come home sweaty and bloody almost every day. But when I'm doing crunch with my games, it's not the same. So that's something I wanted to bring up with Stefan back in the day. But yeah, I didn't. But this poll, on the other hand, made me think about that. I'm not sure what my point is, but I feel like the crunch stuff, I really, really wonder. Okay, so this is my point. I wonder what the people who think it's so tough, I'm curious to know what they did previously in their lives, or if this is their first job. Because if this is their first job, I can imagine, or I can see it. Like, yeah, I see why you think this is tough. But if you've had like a, in quotes, real job, then I don't see it. Like, who could complain about this? Like, you're just sitting on your ass in front of a computer. It's nothing comparing to physical, real, again, in quotes, I'm using air quotes here, real jobs. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, very interesting. So, I would say a couple of points. So, I guess for our listeners, I think it's really important to be aware of what your like idea of a quote, real, unquote, job is. So for me, I haven't worked or been employed with physical labor per se, but I think I am a person who do enjoy that type of work, like on my spare time, I guess. So maybe I can't really compare, but yeah, I would agree with you though that working at like office work, even though that can be very mentally exhausting, it's sort of not the same. But in a way, I would say maybe it's, as you say, that the thing you're used to is what you're it's more exhausting. But for some reason, I feel that it's easier in some way to have, say, for example, if that's comparable, like shoveling snow. So back in the day, I used to live in a house with my family when I was a kid that had like a big porch, and this porch was like almost half the size of the inside of the house. There was some days that when you had to shovel the whole thing, that took, because I was just a kid, that took a whole day. But in some sense, I would say that it's easier, for me at least, with some physical labor, because you don't have to, like, it becomes sort of meditative in some way, because you don't have to think and you just have to do, and even though you're tired, you can just keep going and you just think about nothing. But in another way, mental labor, if you would call it that, is more like, it's not as easy to just go, because sometimes you're just stuck and because of like the rubber duck effect that I've talked about, I guess, at some point, you become stuck and you just don't remember that you have to take a break and just like explain to somebody else or do something else to proceed, and then you can just sit there with a headache for 2 hours and get nowhere. It's hard to compare, I guess. But I understand what you're saying, and I would say what you're saying, that making video games isn't hard, goes to that saying that if you work with something that you love, you won't have to work a single day in your life. And I think that holds true a little bit for me as well, because I do like working with IT as I do now, and I love working with games, and that is absolutely true for me, that even though it can be like draining sometimes, it doesn't feel like what I would call real work, even though I think sometimes I'm exhausted, because you love it. It's like the time flies and you get stuff done, and then once you're done, you sort of forget about the strain and all the hardship, I would say. That also is a good segue to our episode Q&A, which perhaps this person feels the same way. So Spotify also has this feature where you could just ask a question and the audience can answer it. So the related question to the poll was, do you crunch when developing games? And we have one answer from a person who said all the time. So I would imagine that this person perhaps is not employed by someone, but maybe is someone who does video games on their own and has a passion for it, and then, or maybe I'm putting words into this person's mouth, but I would guess
no, you're not. That person was me. No, I'm just kidding.
What a twist!
Yeah, what a twist!
We're just rigging the whole thing and just reading our own comments. Yeah, but I would guess if you're crunching all the time, I guess either you're mentally ill or you absolutely love doing video games, and no, you're not necessarily mentally ill, but I would guess that you would be very stressed if you're crunching all the time and you're uncomfortable by it. But my guess is that if you crunch all the time, that it's because it's something you love doing and something that you want to do. I think it's a matter of perspective, just as you said. So I think it can be like both a blessing and a curse, but the important thing, I guess, is that you're in command of what you want to do with your time and your life, I suppose. All right, so I think we've gone through the statistics and stuff for the last episode, so we could do maybe a sort of look back at the previous year to see how far we've gotten with our games. Do you want to start, or should I go first?
Well, you can go ahead.
Absolutely. Let's see here if I can get GitHub, so maybe I can look at the commit history of our game. So I don't know exactly how I can count how many commits was done this year, but we worked quite a bit during this year, so I'm just gonna look at about where we were at the beginning of this year. This year, I think we've gone from having sort of a prototype for our game to having all of the core features completed, actually.
Oh.
So now our game, you can plant a plant, and you can water it, and you can harvest it, and buy seeds, and sell the harvest and stuff. So all of the core features has been completed this year. So now I think we're just working to get it to a playable state where you have an actual level and like a menu and all of that stuff, and fixing some bugs and some UX stuff. So hopefully in the coming year, I think we've said this last year, but in the coming year we hope to release the game, I would say. So hopefully you can just release it as quickly as possible and just get it better and better after release, I would say.
If you're gonna port the game to PlayStation 5, I know a small studio with a PlayStation 5 test kit.
Ooh, nice. So you've gotten your hands on one, I assume.
Yeah, I have one. I was actually porting my Red Colony games and Knife Boy to it, but then my well, you know what happened. My wife got kicked out and from Sweden, so we had to flee and seek refuge in Japan. So all the PlayStation 5 stuff is just on hold until we move back to Sweden. So it might be a year from now.
I heard that the PlayStation 5 test kits are quite expensive. Is that correct?
Yeah, €1,000. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that because you signed some papers. No, but actually, that information is live. Yeah, it's about €1,000. What would that be? $1,200 ish.
Yeah, something like that. Interesting. So, can anyone get their hands on it, or what are the requirements to getting one?
So, as far as I can tell, you have to have a company in order to get a test kit. Because when I started making the Red Colony games, I was going to self-publish them, but I was living in Japan, I didn't have a company, and I had no idea how to start a company in Japan. So then we moved to Sweden, and then I started a company in Sweden, and then I still had because while in Japan, I got in touch with my publisher, and then, they lent me test kits for the Switch. Or, I worked with them in their office and all that stuff, so I could test things out there. But then when I moved to Sweden, I obviously didn't have access to those things anymore. So I had to send them builds to Japan, because I do think there are some rules too that you can't just take a test kit and fly to another country. For example, I know for a fact that you can't. I emailed Sony before moving to Japan and explained the situation, but I'm not allowed to bring the test kit to Japan. However, it looks like I can sort of rent one while I'm here from like a Japanese Sony. Because the one I got was from Britain. Anyway, what was your question again?
I think you did answer the question. So the question was who is eligible to get one and what does it cost?
I think you have to have a company, as far as I can tell, because when I filled out the information and all that, it was like my company details. Like a proper company mail. You can't just use a Gmail, if I remember correctly. So you have to have a company.
Then I would also, for the people who are not really in the know, so to speak, what is a PlayStation 5 test kit and why do you need one to begin with?
Yeah. Well, interesting. Well, first of all, like I said, I signed a bunch of papers, so it's like I'm not sure what you're allowed to say or not, but basically, I mean, it's just it goes the same for I don't even have an Xbox test kit or my own Switch test kit now, but they're all the same, I suppose. It's just like it looks exactly like a PlayStation 5. It looks actually, I saw a test kit before the PlayStation 5 was released, and that looked really weird, but now they look like a PS5 or a Switch or Xbox or whatever, but you can just hook it up to your computer, and then when you are a company and you have become a partner with PlayStation or Nintendo or Xbox, you get access to this SDK, something that you can just download from their servers, but obviously you need some credentials to get in there, which is your email and all that stuff, so it's all checked that you are who you are and you have a company and all that and you're a PlayStation partner. So then you log into PlayStation's, I don't know, some place, and then you can download the test kit and then to your computer, and then you can connect the computer to the test kit. I think you can do it via like a cable or through the local internet. Another thing you have to have is a static IP number, which is really annoying because I didn't have one. So then I had to find like an internet provider that could give me a static IP. And then when I got that, otherwise you can also contact Sony, for example, and ask them to whitelist your IP number so you can connect from the computer to the test kit. Or you could also do it with cable, I think. I think I did it with the internet. And then, yeah, your computer and the PlayStation test kit are communicating with each other. So then when you build your games in Unity, for example, you can transfer them to the test kit to try them out, make sure the trophies pop, or if you have DualSense implementations, make sure they work. So yeah, it's just a way to try your game out before you send it to PlayStation or Nintendo or Xbox, where they have internal staff that check the game. I think those things are probably going to be replaced with AI eventually, but that's another thing. So anyway, you send it to PlayStation or Nintendo, whatever, and then they will try the game. I know Nintendo is very picky, which is obviously a good thing. Not sure if you noticed, but when you buy Nintendo games, even like indie games on Nintendo, they tend to be more better than on other platforms because the Nintendo game testers, if you will, are quite picky and they want to make sure they really play the games. So that's really good. It can be annoying, of course, because, you know, you send it in and then 2 weeks later you get an email like, we found these bugs, you have to fix them, and then you have to apply again, and so on and so on. But yeah, I've never done it with PlayStation, so I don't know how picky they are. You know, there's that story about Black Tiger or something like that, and that's supposed to be a really buggy game, so maybe they're not as picky. But nonetheless, you want to try out your game, and obviously if you are serious making games, you want to make sure it's as bulletproof as possible. Which it will never be. Trust me, I played all my games like a million times, but they always, at release, they are full of bugs. So it's almost impossible to find them all. Yeah, that's a little bit of a test kit and how the process is to get it out there. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I guess the basic idea of it is that you can't actually just test your game at all on a console unless you have a test kit, because they're sort of like iPhones. You can't just install a program or just create a program and then run it on the PlayStation, but you need a test kit in order to even see that it runs, I guess.
Yeah, well, we will get into that in a minute, like how far I came this year. I guess this is a little bit about that. But with the Knife Boy, for example, when I rebooted it, I spent like, I don't know, let's say 3 months sort of fixing the game. And then I spent maybe 6 months making sure it could run on the Switch. So it is, yeah, it really isn't just like upload it to your Switch and start playing. There's tons of things you have to change and fix, and you know, the screen size and the saving system is different on the Switch. As far as I can tell on the PlayStation, from what I tested, it seems like it's kind of like a PC. So that's good for porting. But the Switch, for example, has a different saving system. It has, and you need to obviously, if you use Unity, for example, you have to download all these Switch inputs, like what do you call them, the packages you download.
Yeah, exactly, an extension.
Yeah, so like the Switch ones. So then you implement that to your game, and then all of a sudden you get like a million error messages because it's a lot of work actually, and it's really boring. So I would say, you know, before when I sort of poo-pooed the gaming industry and the people working in front of computers, porting games, I would say, that's the only time I feel like this is real work, because fuck me, that's boring. Oh, it's boring.
It's the plumbing of IT.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so tell me about your year then. You released at least one game that I know of.
Yeah, did I release Red Colony 3 this year? I can't. I think it came out in the beginning of this year. Yeah, 2022, March, yes, that's true. I released 2 games this year, Red Colony 3 and Knife Boy Rebooted. So Knife Boy Rebooted is actually on Steam as we record this. It's going on sale, I think it's tomorrow or the next day after tomorrow. They're having a Steam sale. So this is secret information that you're not allowed to tell ahead of time. But this episode is not going to come out until way later, so don't worry about it. But yeah, I released... I released Red Colony 3 beginning of the year. That went through development hell towards the end. So it was supposed to come out in like October 2021, but it just kept having these bugs. And yeah, like I said, you send in the game to Nintendo, they find a bug, you take it back, you fix the bug, well, you thought you fixed it, you send it back and they try it, and then it was just back and forth for months. So that was horrible. But it eventually came out, and actually, when I sent in Red Colony to Nintendo, for example, I would sit and work on the Knife Boy reboot, waiting for the results, and then they found some bugs, and then I will fix them and then send them back. and then sit and work on Knife Boy again. So that's at least you are not just sitting there doing nothing. So you can always work on something else. So in my case, I worked on the reboot, and like I said, it took like 2-3 months just to improve all the graphics, the scripts, and implement the 2D lights that Unity added, since Knife Boy, the original one, came out 2019, so it didn't have those 2D light effects. So I implemented all of that, made it look beautiful and all that, and then I started porting it to Switch. And it finally came out a month ago, but I would say it's been done for like, I don't know, 3-4 months. But again, you send it to Nintendo and they try it, and I send it to my publisher and they play it and find bugs, or they have like, because it's translated to 8 languages, there will be some like language things that didn't make sense. For example, in German you have female and male, I don't know what it's called, like something. So then a playtester in Germany tried it and said, well, this should be this word instead of this word because it's a man saying it, not a woman, and so on. So it took like, I don't know, 2-3 months just to fix all the small things. But it was actually a very solid game. From like when Nintendo finally played it, they only found like 3 bugs, but 2 of them are like small bugs that you can just tell them don't ignore it. But one of them was quite like it has something to do with loading and saving, so that was a more serious one. So anyway, finally got that out, and now I have been working on my next project for a couple of months. I started working on it in Sweden this summer at work, like my other job. So I worked in this facility in Sweden with I don't know what you call it.
So you worked at some kind of home for psychological care, I guess, something like that.
Yeah, so I did that, and then during my breaks at that job, I would follow this tutorial on how to make the type of game I want to make. So I done all the tutorials. This is an ongoing tutorial, so it's not done yet. But at this point, like, I have to wait for the next episode, so I'm just like start working on the graphics and making my own scripts, because my game will not be exactly like the tutorial is making. So yeah, at this point I feel quite satisfied where I'm at. And once I've done the tutorial once, I went back and did it again just to sort of make sure that I understand how everything works, because it really is a game that is very different from both Knife Boy and the Red Colony games. So it's really complicated, but I've done the tutorial twice now, so I feel like I'm getting I'll start to understand it. Just the last 3 days I've been working on a debug menu, and that's one of the things I learned, by the way, from my previous games, is that you really need to implement that while you make the game, or early on, so you can sort of, when you bug test the game later on, you can sort of open this menu and just mess around with a bunch of stats to see what happens, and so you don't have to sort of play the game from start to finish over and over and over again. So you can just jump in somewhere and add hearts or health points or whatever you need to do. So I'm working on that now, a debug menu for my new game.
Tell me more about the debug menu. How is so you're able to change variables like in games and go to specific levels, or how does that work? Or is it like a cheat code maybe?
Yeah, it's kind of like a cheat code. Actually, in Knife Boy, I was gonna keep the debug menu in, because that's one of the things I learned when I did the reboot of Knife Boy. I did this debug menu. So for example, in Knife Boy, you can have I think 5 different blades on your head. So when you bring up the debug menu, you can I just have a bunch of buttons, and then I name them, the fire blade, this blade, blah blah blah, and then you press on them, and then you get it, and then you can equip it. Or if you need more money, you can tap this button, it says money, and then you tap it, and then you add like 100 coins per tap. Or in this menu I also had like, you can fast travel to different levels. There are some certain items in the game that you need. For example, in Knife Boy you can play a game within the game. But in order to play that game in Knife Boy, you have to go to a level and find that game It's like an 8-bit Nintendo-ish game. So you have to go to a level and find that game. And when you have it, you can go to this other place and play that game. So with this debug menu, I can just bring up the debug menu and tap the button, and then I have the game, and then I can play it straight away. So that's really useful when you playtest your game. So now, with this new game, I'm already doing it, but this new game, I think I said last episode or something like that, like it's more about relationships and stuff like that. So, for example, now I'm working on when you talk to characters, they will have like the dialogue will branch. So let's say, hey Odo, how are you doing? You say, I'm fine, how are you? And then the player can then say, yeah, I'm good, or just like fuck off. And then based on what you say, Odo in this case, he will get sad if I tell him to fuck off, or he will be happy, and so on. So if I make you happy, you get, in the NPCs, so it's an NPC now, in his sort of status menu, he should have like these hearts. So eventually if I get enough hearts, you will, you and I become a thing. Yeah, that's sort of like the sort of debug menu I'm making now. So if I want to impress Odo really fast, I just open the debug menu and tap heart, and then we're in love. So that's what I'm working on now. And it's very useful to have that when you later on. So I really recommend doing those things.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. That's not something that I actually thought about while making my game. The way I've done it, maybe it's an amateur way of doing it, but I've just had temporarily either serialized or put the variables that I need to change to public, so that I could just change them in game if I need to. But since we haven't done level design that much, there's no other level to go to, so I guess that could be really useful for something like that, or spawning items or...
Yeah, I recommend it. And also when you playtest the game, you shouldn't always playtest it in Unity, because as far as I can tell, it sometimes acts differently in Unity and outside Unity. And if you're gonna, for example, port it to Switch or PlayStation, you don't have those variables like you have in the Unity engine or in the Unity editor. So even if you playtest the game on PlayStation, you can bring up this debug menu and just add more tomatoes or whatever it is you need. So I would recommend to implement that. I just made it simple, it's just like a UI canvas, and then you have all these buttons and I just name them. When I playtest the game, I just hit the select button and then it brings up that menu. And there's nothing else attached to the select button, so that's it. Like, it's easy to implement later on as well.
That's absolutely something I'm gonna take with me. Your 2 games that you have released, in short, how much time would you say that either one took? Like how many months?
Well, Knife Boy was, my first game. When I first made it, it took like 3 years. It took forever. And the reboot, what did I say? 3-4 months? 2-3-4 months-ish. Plus all this BS that makes it just takes forever. So I don't know, like let's say Knife Boy took 6 months in total, the reboot. Red Colony, it must have been like the third game. 2-3 months to make the game, and then another 2-3 months with all the BS and the back and forth, bug fixing and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the thing. I feel like with Red Colony, my goal was what I was hoping was to release them every 3rd month. But it is just like, by the time your game is done until it's released, there is so much stuff, like boring stuff that you have to deal with, which is, getting in touch with Nintendo or PlayStation or whatever. And this back and forth and all that stuff. Prepare assets, prepare trailers and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that I don't like when the game is actually done, which is a bummer, because then, like I said, making games is just so much fun all the time. But I do think that the final part of it is damn boring, and that's when it sort of feels like work. But, when you're through that, it feels like, and you can start your next project, it's all fun. It's fun again. But yeah, about, something like that, 2-3 months. But yeah, it's difficult to say, because it's, when I feel like the game is done, and then when it's out, it can be months, because there's always some small things that I have to fix, that I that Nintendo tells me to fix, or my publisher or whatever. It's difficult to tell.
The first one with the Knife Boy sounds very similar to me, that it's taken years now for something that probably doesn't feel like it would take that long.
How long have you been working on this game? And also, what is the name called? Do you have a name for it?
Yeah, it's called Tulip Craze. Like, I don't know if you know the story, but way back in the day in the Netherlands, I think, for some reason there was the price of tulip seeds skyrocketed. Like, a lot of people compare Bitcoin to tulipomania is the actual name of the phenomenon. So the thing was that for some reason the price of tulips, or it's called the tulip bulbs, like light bulbs. So the tulip bulbs, they rose and dived like really quickly, like 1,000% in a single day or something like that. And it was one of the first examples of super volatile prices. So what we thought was that since you can grow tulips in our game, that would be sort of a catchy name, Tulip Craze, that we call it. Because the tulips are supposed to be the currency for the game. So that you're able to either, you grow them and then you can either use them as money, or you can plant new ones for more money. You have to decide what strategy to have, how much money you need for, because you can sell them and then buy other seeds, but then you don't get as much money to buy other seeds. So should you only do tulips until late game, or should you do only like other seeds quickly? Or
what would be the benefit of making other seeds then?
You should be able to sell them as well, but maybe at like a fraction of the costs for the tulip bulbs. I think we haven't decided on exactly the economy factor of it yet, but that's sort of the outline of the idea. So we'll see in a year if we're going for the same idea, or if this is just a house of cards.
And how long have you been working on it, you said?
So I'm scrolling through my commit history on Git. Let me see if I can get to the first one. At least I can say that there's a lot of commits, so we've worked a lot on it. So actually the first commit was on March 27th, 2021. So that's a little bit over a year and a half, I guess. Yeah, I thought it was like 3 years or something.
Did you guys work on a different game before this one?
We did. So we have another game. Let me see if I can. That we never got to fruition. We still, I mean, that's the story with where we had like this giant wish list and sort of never got to like executing on it. So we only got to like controlling the character and a little bit of level design, but not much beyond that. So ironically, that game, even though we worked on it for like a year or something, it only has like 41 commits. And the game that we're working on now, that we worked on for less time, I would actually say, that one has 440 commits as of today. Yeah, I would say that we've gotten a lot further with this one, and a lot closer to a real game.
Do you think you will ever go back to the other game and finish it, or
Yeah, I think so, or that I wish at least that we will do that, because I think there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of ideas that haven't been done before, in terms of at least setting and environment and some gameplay stuff. But unfortunately, that idea is maybe too ambitious for what I'm currently able to do. So we're talking about like especially procedurally generating the world like Minecraft, that you would think that there are like finished like packages and stuff to do that, and there are some, but if you want to customize it and like do it in a specific way, you have to understand how it works, and that's way beyond me. I would say maybe one day when I can make some successful games and then hire an engineer that thinks that those things are fun to do. Because for me, everything like related to math and equations and like random data and stuff, I hate it. I just wanna like have that done and then just work on like the vision. So yeah, I'm really optimistic, I would say, that we're gonna finish it someday soon. Maybe 2023 will be the year. I hope so, at least. Are you playing anything in particular right now, or?
Actually, I bought, when we came to Japan, I bought Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I think I said that last episode, but I have stopped playing it now. It didn't. I mean, I think I played it for like 30 hours, and then something happened, and I stopped playing it. I think I got hooked making my own game instead. That's usually what happens. So I stopped playing it, and now I'm just... I tried to play it for the last couple of days when I was in bed with Corona, but nope, it didn't do it for me. I liked the second game way better. It was, it was more addicting than this one. So I stopped playing it, and I think I will never go back and finish it. And now I am eyeing a Steam Deck instead, since I really want to play the Elden Ring. So I'm thinking about buying a Steam Deck and buying Elden Ring and play that, like, because I'm moving down to Tokyo, but my son and wife will stay here in the mountains, so I will work in Tokyo Monday to Friday and come back in the weekend. So I'm thinking to get a Steam Deck and sort of use that for the bus/train ride in the weekends when I go back and forth. So that would be, 6 hours every weekend I can sit and play that on the train or bus. So that's pretty nice. That's what I think I'm gonna do. So moving forward, I think I will have more to say on the gaming front, but my Switch is not doing it. It's just lying there. And I'm really excited to get a Steam Deck, and it's just got on sale here in Japan. You can order them, and it seems like it's not that difficult to get one. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and order one as soon as I get my visa, which I'm still waiting for. But yeah. And what are you playing?
So I would say that my situation is a little bit like yours, that I don't really have as much time as I would want to just play games. But for some reason I've started playing so I looked through my Steam library about a month ago or something like that for some game that could be very, very casual, that I could just jump in and out of, just play a little bit. So, and then I found Lord of the Rings, the Lego game, which was, I think it suits that my needs very well. So I played through that and did 100% on it. And then and then now I thought that was so fun, so I'm gonna just keep playing Lego games. So I looked through my other libraries and saw that in my Epic library, Epic Games, I had the Batman Lego games, all three of them. So the Lego games, I would say, is really, really good for when you don't have a lot of time, because it's not very difficult, so you can just you will be able to complete it. That's like not a worry. And then once you go through all of the levels, the point of the games are sort of completionism. So you want 100% everything. So you want to unlock all of the secrets in the levels, and you want to unlock all of the characters and all of the skins and stuff, and you collect all of the money and all of that stuff. And that takes very little effort, and it's really like de-stressing to just do something so simple and just feel that after playing through everything, then you could just say to yourself that, now I've completed this little part, and now I've completed this little part. So it's really, really good for that, I would say. Alright, I think now we've gone over an hour, so maybe it's time to close the doors for this episode. What do you say?
Yeah, that was Yeah, fun. We start talking about the statistics and we derail all over the place. I liked it. It was good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited to see next week's episode when that's gonna be released. So that's gonna be about the game Haze Manor 2, if I'm not mistaken. So that's gonna be fun to see what the people think about that episode.
Do you think we ever sort of catch up to where we're at? So we will sort of record them the same week as they get released?
I would think maybe, because the things take time to edit and to manage everything outside of the actual recording. I would say if I were self-employed and could determine my own hours, that would make it easier. Or if I've been thinking also about if we would start like a Patreon or something. If people contributed, then you could outsource the editing and everything else. So you would just show up and then just record and then send it off to the people we pay to edit and do all the marketing stuff. And then they will just publish on time. And then, yeah, so in a case like that, if you build up the audience and build, for example, a Patreon and then get enough money to be able to pay someone to do all of the hard work with this podcast, then I think absolutely that we could just record it like now it's Thursday, so then release it on Wednesday the following week or something like that.
No, that would be awesome. Also, I should learn how to edit so I can help out on that front. Because I am self-employed at this point, so I should be able to carve out that kind of time. So let's fingers crossed for that in the future, or a Patreon.
Exactly. So I'm betting or I'm hoping for the Patreon. So everyone, keep your credit cards nearby for when we possibly start a Patreon. Nice. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I see you next week.
Yes, absolutely. Bye.
Bye.